Okay, so for this question 6, it is also an O-level question. So most people, when they look at the question, they are okay with part 1 because they can see that we got a curve and we got a straight line, and a straight line is being tangent to a curve. So eventually that means you will get 1 root. So most of you will be able to execute this idea of 1 root, and the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. But this time round, to get your ABC, you need to do a simultaneous equation. So you got to combine them into a simultaneous equation to get your ABC. So if you combine them, equation 1 equal to equation 2. So most of you will be able to do this part. So don't get distracted because the expression looked very long. Because it's actually not that difficult. So if you do it carefully, you'll find that it's actually quite easy. So some people, they are actually distracted because the equation looks very long, and then they get their mind get weaker, and then like they cannot even execute. So other than that, right, in this case, you will get a 16, you will get this, and you will get this, and you should be able to put it into the condition. So eventually you will get 2 answers. But you will reject the negative answer because they wanted a positive. So you will get a k equal to 9. So if you get past this, then the second part is the one a lot of students couldn't do. So if you take a look at the question, they say that the curve and the straight line is tangent at point P. So essentially point P is the point of contact, which means you got to do your simultaneous equation. But you will find that it's really not possible to do the simultaneous equation because there's still one unknown. And why do you think they gave you this point? So a lot of students, they don't know how to make use of this point. The purpose of giving you this point is to sub your x and y. So a lot of students, they are not very good with this context. They don't have the instinct that if a point is on a straight line, you can sub the x and the y coordinate. So a lot of people will have this issue. Okay, so they say that the curve passes through the point. So you should sub the x and y into the curve. So you should sub the x and y into the curve. Okay, do you sub your k or not? Yes. You already gotten your k. Please sub your k. And eventually, because you sub your x and y, you also sub your k, you will be able to solve for the c. So the reason why they give you this coordinate is to help you to find c. So you will be able to find c. C will end up to be a 5. Once you know c is a 5, together with the k equal to 9, you return back to the equation. So you can return back into the equation. And do your simultaneous equation. So from your simultaneous equation, you will get your coordinate of P. So the critical thing about this question is most people, they didn't know how to make use of the concept of the curve passing through this. So it's actually quite easy. I mean, this is the XY coordinate. So what can you do with the XY coordinate? Isn't it just sub into the equation of the curve? So this is the awareness. But some may not have this instinct, so they find themselves getting stuck at this question. Okay, and then the last part is actually more like a thinking question. So the straight line meet the curve at only one point. So when we see a straight line meeting the curve at only one point, usually we'll think of tangent. But in this case, they say that it's not going to be a tangent. So what could this one be? So you got to recognize your curve first. What's your concept? So the curve is a small graph. So it is a small graph. And then what kind of line can meet at one point but not tangent? The line is actually a vertical line. So any vertical line will cut the curve at only one point. So it's not a horizontal line also, because horizontal line will cut at 2 points. So what can you deduce about L? L is just a vertical line, that's all. Okay, so I don't think this one is very difficult. If you thought about it, I think this one is quite okay. The last one, okay, the last one, most of you wouldn't have issue with part one, so I'm not going to go through part one. So part one, you put in the k equal to -6, and then to get the point of intersection, you are supposed to do your simultaneous equation. So I will not be explaining this part or showing you this part. I'm going to emphasize on the showing. So in one of the previous questions, I already explained. If you are supposed to show, you are supposed to use the discriminant, and then you explain. So we are trying to explain why the line will intersect the curve at 2 points. So we are trying to explain why there are two routes. So we are trying to explain why there are two routes, why the discriminant is greater than 0. So you need to use a discriminant to explain. Do not start with this. If you start with this, then you get no marks. You are supposed to explain. You are not supposed to start with what you eventually want. So what you should do will be get your discriminant first. Get your discriminant by doing the simultaneous first. You need the simultaneous to get your ABC. You need your simultaneous to get your ABC. Then you do out your discriminant. Let me make sure that I get my discriminant first. So this is your discriminant. This is how your discriminant look like. You observe how your discriminant look like. Can you see that there is a square? So any function that is being squared will be positive. You square any value, it will be positive. So I'm going to explain it this way. So I'm going to explain, I'm going to target the square. So since this is always positive, then you try to get, you add 88 on both sides, and this become your discriminant. That means, right, the value of the discriminant is always 88 or more. So the discriminant ends up to be always positive. So the implication of a discriminant that's always positive means there will always be two roots. Therefore, the line will intersect the curve at 2 points. Okay, so you got any showing question in this topic got to be done by get your discriminant first. Then you use the discriminant to explain, depending on how the discriminant look like. So in this case, my discriminant is not just a value. It contains an expression and plus 88, an expression together with a value. So I got to explain the expression first, the 3 minus k squared expression. Okay, the previous one, my discriminant is 0. So I just have to explain that the discriminant is 0 is an indication that it is a one root. So in this case, you must explain why it always ends up to be positive, because it comes from the idea of squaring. So this is always positive. You add the 88 to both sides. That gives you your expression for discriminant. I wouldn't know the exact value, but I do know that it's going to be 88 or more. 88, 89, 90, blah, blah, blah. So that means it's a always positive value. So it's an indication of two roots.